Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on the time you are accessing this material. Today we are going to consider PHP MySQL databases. So you will need this knowledge when you are writing a server-side script using PHP and connecting to the database. So if you are a web developer, you will need this knowledge. If you are a mobile app developer, most often you connect the mobile interface to the server and you need to connect to the database. So you also need this knowledge if you be using PHP at the database or at the server side. And if you are also learning web design, sometimes you may have a form where you ask the visitors of the page to fill the form. And if you decide to store that information on the database, you also need this concept. So welcome to PHP MySQL databases. And what are we going to learn? We are going to learn how you can create a database and how you can add a table, how you can add the data to the table, how you can view the stored data, and how you can modify information you stored on the database, and how you can delete information stored on the database. Okay, so basically this is what we are going to consider. So welcome to the course. Now, what is a database? So a database is a separate application that stores a collection of data. So a database stores collection of data. Each database has one or more distinct APIs for creating, accessing, managing, searching, replicating the data it holds. Okay, so each database has its own script or syntax that you can use to either store, access, replace, or duplicate, or whatever you want to do on the database. There are syntax you need to use. So there are a number of databases. But we have the Oracle, we have the Access, we have the MySQL database. But this course, we are going to learn about MySQL database. So these are some technologies you need for the course so that when I say something, you know what I'm talking about. So we have a database which I have explained over here. A database is a collection of tables with related data. So if you have a database, you have several tables in that database. So remember, a database contains tables. So tables can be found in the database. So first, before you create the tables to store the information in it, you need to create a database first. Then you can create the tables in that database. So this concept you must keep. So tables are found in database. So before you create tables of how you be storing the information inside, you need to create first of all create what? A database first. Okay. Then a table is a matrix with data. A table in a database looks like a simple spreadsheet. So a table in a database look like a simple spreadsheet with rows and columns. So we have rows and we have columns. If you all know what a column is, so the columns are the vertical lines and the rows are the horizontal ones. Then we have a column. Okay, so like I've explained, one column data element contains data of one and same kind. For example, the column postcode. Okay, so columns they contain the same information. So you have a column name. So when you name your column, all the information you stored in that column is the same. So you can't have a column called age where you're storing first name in it. No. So once you set age, all the content of that column should be relating to age. Then we have a row. So a row is a group of related data. For example, a data of one subscription. So like I've explained, so we have our rows here and we have our column. So one complete row is a one complete information which has all the columns for that particular information. Then we have a primary key. So when you are doing when you are writing your database, your tables, there are some information that are unique, and these informations we normally use them to identify that unique information. So each of their values are unique. They never get repeated. There cannot be two instances where two of them are found in a table because they must all be unique. For example, if you have a database called users, okay, in the users, you can have a column called an ID. So in that ID, each user will have a unique ID to identify that user. No, most often we use auto increment. We start from 1, 2, and as a new user goes on, it increase. So that concept we call it auto increment. So anytime there is an insertion to the database, the value of ID increase. So this ID we can call it as a primary key, which means that there won't be any situation where a user may have the value 2 and another user will have a value 2. No. So that's basically a primary key. So if there is a repetition of the value of a primary key, you get a syntax error. So you'll be informed that there's a duplication because each primary key should be unique. There can't be an instance where primary keys have the same value. No. So each of them must be unique. Then we have a foreign key. So a foreign key links two tables together. So if you have table 1 and table 2, then the key in table 1 which relate to table 2 becomes a foreign key. So it's a key in table 2, but it's also a key in table 1. Most often, foreign keys are primary keys in the other table. For example, if you have table 1 and table 2, the primary key of table 1 can be a foreign key in table 2. Okay, which means that that one is also unique and it links both table 1 and table 2 because the value of that foreign key in table 2 can be found in table 1. So take note, a foreign key value which is not found in the other previous table will have an error because a foreign key needs to exist in the other table which is linking it to. Okay, so you should master this technology because we are coming across most of them in our database lectures. Okay, so to use the MySQL database, you need to start MySQL. For Apache, we've already been seeing that when we started coding our PHP. Okay, and if you are accessing this video at the time you haven't learned PHP, please, we'll be writing our script in PHP. So you take the web development course, which have the introduction of PHP to have some basic concept of PHP. So when you are writing your PHP script in XAMPP, you need to start the Apache server. So by just clicking here to start, then you need to also start MySQL so that you have the access to the MySQL database. If you haven't started, you can't have access to the MySQL database because you need to start the MySQL database first. Okay. So when you start XAMPP, so if you search for XAMPP and you start, as you can see, this is the start. So you have to start your Apache, then you also have to start MySQL. Okay. Now, one of my students contacted me. He said when he was starting the MySQL, it wasn't starting. It was giving an error. So remember, if there is a conflicting software which also has MySQL and XAMPP also has MySQL. So if you already have installed MySQL on your server and you also have XAMPP on it, then there will be there will be a conflicting this, and so you need to uninstall one of them so that you don't get that error. So you have to uh, recall which application you've installed, which has the MySQL or it has the database related. Then you have to uninstall that one, then application. Of course, when you finish whatever you are doing, you reinstall it again. And sometimes too, if the port number also conflicts with any other applications which has the same port number, then it will also not be able to start. So in that case, you need to change the port number of one of them. So now I've started my Apache, I've started my SQL as well. Okay, so this is this part. So I've started my Apache, I've started my okay. Now to have access to your database, you need to type the localhost in the browser. Then you click on php which has the database. So when you type in your localhost and the first page comes, you have to click on php my So okay, so I think I've opened localhost here. Localhost is over here. So you can see php my over here. So this is where you have your database interface. So I can click over here. Okay, so as you can see, this is a PHP admin. So this is interface, the PHP database interface. Okay, so we are going to continue. So that's this you are saying now. Okay, so I'm creating a database. How do you create a database? So like I've said in the previous lesson, I told you that tables are found in what? Database. So if you are going to create tables to store your information, you first of all need to create what? A database. Okay. So now when you open your php the first interface says create database. So here you can create your database by entering the name over here. So the name of your database. So this example, we can call our database. We can call our database. What name should we give to our database? We will call it. Let's say school DB. Let's say for example, so that maybe I think in these lectures most of the examples that we did was relating to students, lectures, and other stuff. So we'll call our database school DB as an example. So if you are creating a project, then your project can also relate to the name you give to your database. Okay, for example, if I'm writing an online shop, for example, I can name my database online DB or however name I want to give to it so that it differentiates it from other databases I already have. Okay, so on the interface where you have databases, so when you click on databases, okay, then you can write the name of your database that you want. Okay, so maybe I have, like I said, uh, school DB. Okay, so once you've written the name of your database, you can click on create. Okay, so once the database is created, you see it at the left hand side over here. So once you select it or it will be automatically selected for you, then you can be creating tables in them. So once you've done that, you can be creating table like you see, it says create table. So in the create table section, you give the table a name, then you write how many columns you need for that table. Okay, this example too, you can create a database using a SQL query. So if you want to use a SQL query, then as you can see, we have our query here. So anytime you want to type in a query, you just have to click on SQL and you can type in that syntax. Okay, so the syntax says that you write create, then database, then you give the name of your database. For example, if I want to create the database socialize, okay, so maybe I'm writing a social network application and I want to create a database called socialize where I put in my tables. So I can write my syntax, create database, database, socialize. Okay. Now remember, you cannot have duplicate database here. If you have another database which is already here, you will be informed, so you won't be able to create it. Okay, so as you can see, this one has also been created. Okay, so if you want to use the query, you just create the database, then the name of your database. Okay, so if I write a database which I already have on my lesson, so let's say school DB. Let's see what it tells us. As you can see, it's an error because we already have a school DB database, so you cannot create another database when you have it already over here. Okay, so that is it. So you can create a database using either the query, SQL query, or you give a name of your database, then you click on create. Now, if you want to drop a database, drop means you want to delete it from the system. Then you also use a keyword drop, then database name. So, for example, if I want to drop the socialized database that I've created, then I'll just need the keyword drop, then database, then I'll enter the name of my database, socialize. Okay, so you can see socialize there. Once I execute this query, it will disappear because it will no longer be available, because drop means you are deleting it. Okay, so as you can see, it has disappeared because it's no longer the database in the system. Okay, so that's it. So if you want to drop a database, you just drop database and the name of your database. Okay, so if you want to drop this, that, so that's an example of drop. Now, like I've explained, data are stored in your table. So once you've created a database, you need to create a table. Now, when you are creating a table, you need to know how many field or column you have for that database. Then you write the number of columns over here, then the name of your table. So table and how many columns you have for that table, then you write it there. Okay. So an example, create a salaries table with 8 columns. So we are going to create a table for salaries for having 8 columns. So in that case, so we're on the school DB. So to execute anything on a particular database, you need to select it first. So you click on the database, then you can execute whatever you want to execute over here. So we say we are creating a table called salaries, and it says it should be 8 columns. So we enter 8 columns over here, then you click on go. Okay, so these are the column names, and these are the data types of them. So in the subsequent slide, we'll talk about database. So these are the names of your column, and this we'll talk about the data types. Sorry, these are the names of your column, and these are the data types you have. Now some data types, if they will have some default values, then you select your default. Then this a underscore I means auto increment. So auto increment, like I've explained in the case of ID. So if auto increment means it will automatically increase. So if it starts from 1, the next time there's an insertion, it will be 2. The next time you insert information, the data will be 3, and so on. So that's what we call auto increment. And most often, auto increment are primary keys. So if you want it to be on a primary key, then you select this part to be primary key. Okay, so if the auto increment is primary key, you select this part. So let's go look at the structure of our salaries table. So it says that the staff, the salary table, we have a column name staff, and the data type is int. Then we have a column name amount, and the data type is double. Then we have a column name month, and the data type is int. We have a column name year, and the data type is int. Then we have the data type, we have the column name token, and the value is text. Then we have a name date, and the value is, the data type is date. Then we have a column name time, and the data type is time stamp. Then the default one is current time span. Now when you choose the current time span, it will insert the time, the date and time that the data was inserted. Okay, so this one you don't need to do the insertion. Anytime there is an insertion to the database, it will automatically insert the date and the time it was inserted. Okay, so if you want to record the time and the date where the insertion is done, then you can choose, you give the column a name, you choose the data type times and stamp, then you choose the current time stamp. So anytime there is an insertion, to insert the current time, the current date and time that the insertion was done. Okay, then the ID is an integer. Then we will choose primary key. So this is going to be a primary key. Then we tick auto increment. So you are supposed to tick auto increment. So anytime there is an insertion, it will be auto increase. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 columns. So like we've done that. So our first column name is staff, and the second is amount. We have amount, and the data type for amount is double. Okay, then after amount we have month and year. So the data type for month is int, then year 2 is int, then the next one is token. Okay, so token is a long text that normally we show in the browser. We show them in the browser to fetch an information from your database. So if you are browsing on a particular page and you see maybe some values with a long text, that may be a token. So the token will uniquely identify that column or that row. So you use that token to fetch that row. So the token value will be somewhere here. So if you are doing PHP and you continue, you can get the token value here. So you use it with your query to fetch that row which has that token value. Okay, so that's what we call token. So if you have a table where you'll be fetching some information in your script, you can also have the token where you generate a long text and insert it along with your information, so that we can have this one in the browser and use it to identify the row it belongs and fetch that particular row. Okay, then we have our time. We said the time you should choose timestamp. So we have our timestamp here. Then it's supposed to be current timestamp, so that anytime an insertion is done, it will choose the date and the time that it was done. Then the ID, we said it's supposed to be integer, and it's going to have to tick the auto increment. So you look for a underscore I, so you scroll and then it says you should tick it, so you tick it. Okay, most often when you tick auto increment, it will automatically select it as a primary key. So if it has already been selected, then that is, but if not, then you select this as a primary key. So once you are done, you just click on save. So if everything is okay, then that's it. Then if you go under your database, then you are going to see that table. So over here, that's our database and that is our table. So we have our salaries tables over there. Okay, so that's it basically. Then you can also write SQL query to do the same thing, to create a table, and this is the way we do it. So you use a keyword create, then table. So this is a keyword. So create table, then you specify the name of your table. Okay, then you have your brackets here. So in the bracket, you specify the column and its data type. So column and its data type, column and its data type, so and so on. So you continue based on how many you have. So like the example above, we have staff. So here our column one can be staff and the data type is what? Int. So we have int. Okay. Then we have amount. So you can have amount and the data type for amount is double. Then comma. Then we have a month and the data type for the month is int, comma. Then we have year and the data type for the year is int, then comma again. Then token, then the data type for the token is text, then comma. Then you continue on date, the data type is date, then when you are done, comma. Then we have your time and the data type is time span. Okay. Now this one, you have your current time span on it. So if that one you can specify that is current time span. You just continue it there. Okay. Now then you have your ID. So if you have ID, then the data type is int. Then you attach your auto increment to it. So auto increment. Then command. Then you specify that this ID is a primary key. So you write primary key into bracket ID. That makes the ID a primary key. Okay. So this is an example. For example, if you are writing a table for student, so we can have first name test, last name is test. Then if you want to store the picture name of the student, then you have picture also. Then the student ID, then the token for that student, then the date. Then we have the timestamp. Okay. Then the default is current timestamp. Then we have our ID, which is an integer. Then not now there's an auto increment and the primary key is the ID. Okay, so basically that's it. By default, int values are of the size 11. Okay, so you can specify the size to be 11. Okay, so now we are going to copy this and we execute it so that you can see it in. So we go to our SQL. Okay, so okay. So we have create table, then the name of the table is students. Then our brackets, like I said, then you close it. Then the column name and the data type is text. Column name and the data type is text. Column name, data type is text. Column name, data type is text. Column name, data type is text. Then the column name date, the data type is date. Column name is time and the data type is time span and it is not now. And default, the default value is the current time span. So by default, anytime there's an insertion, it will have the current date and time the insertion was made. Then the ID is an integer of value 11. Then that one too is not now. Then it has an auto increment. So anytime there's an insertion, it will increase. Then the ID is our primary key. So this is how you specify primary key. So you write primary key, then you specify the name of the column, which is the primary key. Okay. So once everything is okay, just click on the go. Then the person will be inserted or created for you. So that has created your table over here. So now we have two tables. Okay. So if you want to see the structure of the table, you just click here, you see the names of the columns and the data types of them. That one you click on structure, then you can see details, the structure of your table. So you have the name, the type, and so on of your table. And it is an auto increment to show you that it's an auto increment. And it is a primary key to show the key S2. Okay. So that's it. So we continue. Now if you want to drop a table, you just use the keyword drop, then table, and the name of the table. Okay, so if you want to drop, for example, the table salaries, you have drop table, then the name of the table is salaries. So in this example, we say drop table student. So if you want to drop the table student, you can say, you can just write drop table, then specify the name of your table. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to drop my salaries table. So if you've already created your salary tables, you can just drop it. And remember, the name of the table match that you type a different name and it's a table that exists in your database. You get a syntax error. Okay, so drop table. So I'm dropping salaries. Okay, so once you've written that query, you can just click on go. And inside, do you really want to execute drop table? So if you are sure that's really the one you want to drop, the name of your table, then just click on it. Okay. So if you see here, you not see again, it disappears. Okay, so that's for dropping table. Now, if you want to empty a table, maybe you have a list of items and now you want to empty everything, delete everything inside the table, but not the table itself. You want the contents for the one you want to delete. If you want to delete the table itself, you use drop. If you want to delete the contents of the table, you use a truncate. So the query is truncate table, then you specify the name of your table. So for example, if I want to truncate the student table, maybe I have information in it and I want to clear everything, then I'll use the function truncate tables. Then I just truncate table, then I'll specify the name of my table over here. So if I want to truncate the student table, then student. So what's the difference between drop and truncate? Drop is you are dropping the entire table, so the table will disappear from the database. But truncate a table is the content of the table that you are going to delete. So if the table has 12 rows, all the rows are going to be deleted. So the table will have no rows anymore. So no information in that table. Okay. So these are the data types you can use for your tables. So we have string data types. So these are string data types. We have the char, we have the varchar, and we have the binary, we have the verbnary. So this is the explanation to them. So you know which one you want to use. So some of the ones which are given size, that one you need to specify the size of them. So So you need to specify the size. When you call it, you need to specify the size. Okay. Okay. So we have the char. A fixed length string can contain letters, numbers, and special characters. The size parameter specified the column length in characters can be from 0 to 255. Okay, so when you got char, you specify the size from either from 0 to 255. So we have 1, if you have 0, then it's empty. So 1, 2, 3, and so on. So you can specify how many columns it can have in the lesson. Then we have the voucher. So the voucher also, you have to specify the length of it. So it's a little bit bigger than the char. So it's a little bit bigger than the char, as you can see, from 0 to 65535. Okay. Now remember, if you are going to store an information in the column and you don't know the size which that column is going to have. Now, if you are using a voucher, which is a must for you to specify, and you specify and the information you are storing it is more than that, then not all the information will be inserted into that database, so into that table. So if you don't know the actual size, if the size is not limited, then it's appropriate to use the test data type. Okay, so we have the test data type, this one. So the test data type it holds a longer text. So you can hold as much as you can see. It holds a string with maximum length of uh, this number of bytes. Not even characters. You can see it holds bytes. Okay. So we also have the long text. So the long text even holds bigger. So you can have all these number of characters in the long text. Okay. Then you also have the long block, which holds this number of bytes of data. Okay. So based on the type that you want to use, most often the varchar and the text are used. Now, if you don't know for the varchar is a must to specify the size. For the text, you can leave it. If you don't know the actual size of your test, then you just the test. So, for example, the example that we use for the students, the data type were all text because some will have a very long name. So, if you use a voucher and specify a short value, the person's listen is longer than that, and that information will cut. Okay, so that's basically that. That's the data type for text. Then we have the numeric data type. So we have the bytes, we have the turning int, then we have the bool, which is true or false. We have the boolean, then we have the small int, medium int, ints. Then we have the integer, we have the big int, we have the float, we have another float, then we have double, we have double, so we have the amount, etc. Okay. So for more accuracy, if you are going to use a number and it's not going to be an integer like a decimal, so then you use double most often. You use double most often. So double is bigger than float. So even though you can use float, you can as well use double. Okay, so that is it. So these are the data types you can use for numbers. And the date one, these are the data types you can use. So we have the date. And take note of the date format. So the date format is supposed to be here, month, then a day. Remember, the date format is supposed to be year, month, and day. Then we have the date time, which has the date and the time as it's combined. Then we have the time span, like I have told you. That one also has the date in this order. Then minutes, hours, minutes, and seconds.
Then we have the time, which only has the time. Then we have the year, which is the 4 digits of the year.
Okay. So that's it for the data types of both dates, numbers, and the strength. So we move on. Then we are on the keys. So we have the unique keys and the primary keys. Then unique, if you have a unique column, it means that the values there cannot repeat themselves. So the values there cannot repeat themselves. If anything unique means it should be for only it will occur only once. So for example, if I say unique, I give an ID to be unique. Okay, and in the row I have an ID 1, and another row I have an ID to be 1. There will be an error when I'm inserting another one because I said it's supposed to be unique. It's not supposed to be more than 1. So that is basically what we have, the unique. So the unique makes sure that that column has only one value. It doesn't repeat itself. Okay. Now, a column in we can have more than one column which is unique. So we can have columns which have unique attributes. So a column can have, so in the table, a table can have more than one unique columns. Okay. So, but for primary keys, we can only have one primary key in the table. So in the table, we cannot have two primary keys columns. So each column has only one primary key. So most often our primary keys are the IDs which are auto increment most often. And those ones are our primary keys. So in this example, we have a table called persons. Okay, and we said the ID is unique. So the ID is unique. Okay, so if you can run this in our example. Okay, so SQL. Okay, so this is supposed to be in a single quotation. Uh, oh no. Okay, it's supposed to be the comma. It's complaining about the comma. It should be comma here. Okay, there should be comma over there. Okay, so remember there should be comma before the unique key. The same with the primary key. There should be comma over there. Okay, so now if you look at the table structure. Okay, okay, so that's it. So this one is unique. The ID is unique, but it's not a primary key. If it's a primary key, it's going to be yellow. But because it's unique, it's light gray or something. Okay. So now, if we want to have that of the primary key, then we can have this one. Okay. So if you, so that's it. So now we can drop the old one, then we can have the same thing. Remember, if you are testing it and you have the old table, we need to drop because they are persons. You can't have two columns, two tables of the same name. So you need to drop the old one before you can write a second query. So like we've already learned, you can drop. So drop table, so drop table persons. Okay. Uh, drop table. Okay. So I can write the second one. Okay. So remember, before either the primary key or the unique, you need to have a comma here. Okay. So that's it for primary key. So if you click on it and you check the structure, okay, so as you can see, for primary key, the color is yellowish. The other one was gray. Okay, so now we're on foreign key. So if you want to have a foreign key, then you can also have okay, we haven't read the foreign key yet. Okay, but this one, this example gives an example where you can join two columns and to get one primary key. So in this example, we have this column we call PK person, which is a primary key, and we join the ID and the last name. We join them to generate our primary key. So like I've explained always, we already have one primary key. We only have one primary key, but it's the result of two columns. Joining two columns generate the value of your primary key. Then we're on a foreign key. So like I've explained, a foreign key joins two tables together. The link between two tables, we use a foreign key. So for example, in this example, we have persons. So persons, we have their IDs. Now, if a person orders for an item, the person ID becomes a foreign key because the this now joins these two tables. This person ID is the one that link this one to that one. So this one becomes a foreign key. Okay, so like I said, a foreign key is a primary key in one of the other tables. So here, this will be a primary key, but over here is going to be a foreign key. So this will be linked to this. So if you are writing a query, so you can match this one with this ID, so you can know who it is. So here, if this come from this ID, so we know the person is Godwin Ashon. Okay, then this order is 3, so it's matched with this ID, so we know it is Mary Agbovi. Okay, then this order is 2, so 2 match with this, we know it's Joseph Tete, and so on. So that's basically what the foreign key is. So a foreign key match links two tables together, and a foreign key is a primary key in the other table. So you should take note of it. Okay, so I've explained everything. Now the foreign key constraint also prevents invalid data from being inserted into the foreign key column because it has to be one of the values contained in the table it points to. Okay, so like I've explained, if you have 4 here, you get a syntax error because there is no 4 in the in at this side where this is linked to. So a foreign key also makes sure that the value you have at a particular column it exists in the ones it links to. Okay, so if you have 4 here, it will not be inserted because you don't have 4 over here. Okay, so whatever we have over should be something that exists in our person's table. Other than that, we get a syntax error. So that's also what the foreign key does. Okay, so we are going to create this table. Okay, so we have create table orders. That's the name of our table. We have person ID is int, then order number is int, then the ID for this order. Then this ID is a primary key. Okay. Now we are linking it to our person's table. So we have foreign key, person ID. So this person ID is a foreign key and references. So it's reference to our persons by column ID. Okay. So let's run it. Okay. So that is the other our other table. Okay. So let's look at the structure. Okay. So you can see the foreign key. So the foreign key is also gray. Then we have our primary key over here. Okay. So that's for the foreign key. So what's the advantage of making a column or giving a column the foreign key attribute? I'm giving you seconds to guess. Okay. So the advantage is that if you are doing an insertion in the foreign key column and that value does not exist in the table it links to, it will not, you get an error, so it will not be inserted. But if you don't specify it to be a foreign key, it will be inserted so far as it's of the data type which is being specified. But if you specify it to be a foreign key, the value you are inserting does not exist in the table it refers to, then there will be a syntax error, so the insertion will not be done at all. So that's the advantage you have for a foreign key. Okay. So the foreign key, you just specify which of the columns is a foreign key and with the reference, which table does it refer to, and the column it links to. Okay. Then we've seen auto increment field. So the auto increment it automatically increases anytime we insert an information. So most often IDs are given the auto increment feature so that anytime we insert a row, it will be increased. Anytime we insert a row, it will be increasing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. Okay. So like this example, it has the auto increment for the ID. Okay. So we can as well create this one if you want. Okay. So you have letters. You have first name, last name, picture, email, password, date of birth, token, ID, primary key, etc. So what we want to emphasize is the auto increment. Okay. And the ID is a primary key. Okay. So that is it for letters. So we'll talk about this. Now, if you want the by default auto increment start from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Now, if you want to change the auto increment where it will start from, then you need to write this query. So alter table, then the name of the table, then the auto increment value that you want it to start from. Then you just assign it over there. So it will change the default increment value to where you want it to start from. Now to insert a new this you don't have to specify the value of the auto increment field. It will automatically be increasing. Okay. So that's basically about it. Now we are on writing our query. So this you need to pay more attention since we are getting close to writing our PHP query. But before we do our PHP part, you need to have some understanding for your MySQL queries or the syntax you use. Now, to insert an information into a particular table, you use a syntax below. You use the keyword insert into, then the name of the table. Then you specify the names of the columns you want to do the insertion. So you list all the columns here. Then so in this bracket will be the names of the columns you want to do the insertion. Then comma bracket. Then values. So you have the values here. Then the values you have your bracket. Then you specify the values for each of the columns names. So column 1 value will be here, column 2 value will be here, then column 3 value will be here, and so on. Now take note that if you are using the data type varchar, a text or a date, you need in the value you need to put them in a single quotation. So the values are supposed to be in the single quotation. For example, if I'm inserting first name, then if my first name is Godwin, then I have to have a single quote, then Godwin, then I close it with a single quote. Okay. So for dates, for voucher and the text or string, so string data types we use a single quotation between them. Date too, we use a single quotation between them. So remember that. So for example, if I want to insert a value into my person's date table, I can write insert into persons, then I specify the column. So I have first name, last name, then token, then values for each of them. So first name value comes there because the string I put in the single quotation. Then last name, then the value of last names comes in because the string I put in the single quotation. Then the token also comes here because the string I put it in the single quotation. So let me write this query in our uh, Python. So we have the persons. Okay, we have the persons table. We do the insertion. Does a person have I have token? Let me check. Tokens. Let me run it. Let's see. In column. Oh, let me delete the old query. Oh, no column token. Okay, so the persons don't have. So let me add it. Okay, so structure. Now, if you want to add a new column, you go to structure. Then the structure, we have add. So you specify how many columns you want to add and where you want to add it. So I want to add it after my age. So I will choose after age. Okay. Then you click on go. So you specify the name of your column, so token, and it's of the type text. Okay, so once you are done, you just click on go. Where is it go? Okay, save. So save. Okay, so now I can do my insertion. Okay, so as you can see, we didn't specify the ID, but because it's auto increment, our ID value is going to be 1. Then the time span too, if we have timestamp for the persons, then that one will also have the time and the dates we did the insertion. So if you want to browse, if you want to check your table content, you click on browse. So the browse shows the columns and their rows of the table. Okay, so now I have my this in here. Okay, I think this one didn't specify the ID to be auto increment, so that's why you have 0 there. But if it were to be auto increment, then it will be 1 over here. Okay, so we move on. So we've done this one. If you want to add another one, you can have one. So in this example, we are adding date. If you want to insert the current date, you use the CURDATE bracket, so in capital blocks. So that's the syntax you use for current date. So in this date column, we are going to insert our current date. So that's what we write for that value. So we have command and the value is going to be CURDATE, then we have our bracket. Okay, so there is no column by date, so we need to insert it. So we go structure, insert the date after our token, and it's of the type date. Okay, so one column after token. So we call it date, and the data type is date. So data type is date. Okay, let me see. Let me see. Let me see. I see already executed it. Why did they say an error? Why is not giving it the doesn't even matter on that? Is it giving an error? So it's not even giving a reason why it's Sql Query. I don't know why it's giving error. Interesting. Okay, so let's check if there is one with data already inside the I don't know why it's not doing a new session. This one has data there. Students. Okay, student has date, so let's use the student. So I'm going to insert into students instead of person. Demonstrate the current date. So insert into students. Insert into student first and last name token date values. Okay, so now we check. Okay, so we have first name, last name, and the token. Then, as you can see, the current date today is 14th of March 2021. So, like I informed you, the year, the month, and the day. Then, because we made the current time, the time span to be current time span, so it's showing the time I did the insertion. Then I have the ID. We said it's auto increment. So this and this, we don't need to insert them manually. It will be automatically be inserted the values. But here is where we use the current date. CURDATE then bracket. That's the function we use to insert this to the current date. So that's for this one. Okay. So remember, if you are using this one in your when you are creating your persons table, add uh, the persons table, add a date inside. So you have the date by type date. Okay, so you can add the date over here as well. So that when you are doing the insertion, I don't know, for strange reason, it's not allowing me to add a column date. But can try it your end and see. Okay. Now, if you want to select all the rows from the table, you use a name. You use a key star. So star means everything. So you have to select, then star, then from, then the name of the table. So if you want to select everything from our student table, so you just select, then star, the name of our table is student. So you to select all the information we have. Okay, so you have select everything from students. Okay, so so as you can see, we have all the things, everything from the students. Okay. Now, if you want to select with a particular condition, so maybe you want to select a particular row or a number of rows which match a particular condition, then we use a where clause. So we write the condition after the where. Okay, so after the where, we write our condition we use to filter our result or to check which column match that condition. So for example, in my student table, if I want to select only this one, if I want to select the one which has this token, if I want to select the one which has this token, I can just use a where condition. So where I have my where I have select everything from students, I can have where my token is equal to. Now remember the column is the token column is there, so the where condition to my value I need to put it in the single quotation. Okay, so this will fetch the row which the token value is this. So the one switch down to have this token value, they won't be fetched. So only the one with this token value will be fetched. Okay, so like as you can see, it has been fetched. And this was the condition. So it got this condition. So that's why it's fetched the results. So that's it. So you select star from table where you write your condition. So the condition where maybe column name is equal to this, or now if you want to join two conditions, then you use the AND keyword to join two conditions, two or more conditions. So for example, in these examples, it says you should select everything from persons where date, then this means greater than or equal to. So where date is greater than or equal to 1st of March 2021 and ID is not equal to 5. So in this case, even if ID is 5 and the date is uh, maybe 2nd of March, which is or 1st of March, because it says the ID not equal to 5, it will leave the one with the ID which is 5. Okay, so that's basically it. So this one means greater than or equal to, this one means not equal to, then the equal to, we've seen the equal to already. Okay, so this course is not a database course. So this I just giving you the main things like inserting into the table, creating the table, inserting into the table, fetching from the table, fetching for a particular row using a condition, where condition. Then we will now look at the updating and deleting. Okay, now you can also select a particular column. So this one selects all the columns. The star means everything. So you select all the columns. Now if you want to select for a particular columns, Then you just specify the names of your column you want to get the result for. So you select this one will bring about the first name and last name columns only. Okay, so we have this. Okay, we are going to run it, but we change it to student because our is table. I don't know if there's something inside. Okay, we have something in our system, so we can. Okay, so remember the dates. Okay, persons don't have dates, so you just make it student. Okay, so this will select the first name and last name, but this is a condition. It says date is equal to 1st of March. So this one we are not going to get anything because the date we have currently is 14th of March because today is 14th of March. So this will uh, produce empty results. So it's a return an empty results. So let me change the date to 14. So we can edit. If you want to edit the query, just click on editing line. So here we change it to 14 because we have a 14 entry inside. Okay. So you can see we have first name and last name. If there are more, they will follow in that the rules. They will just follow. So the next one followed by the next, followed by the next. Okay. So that's it. So if you want to get it for particular columns, you specify the columns here. All of them separated by commas. Now if you want everything, this place will be star. Okay. So that's basically it. Now updating a column. So if you're updating a column, then you just have to use this syntax. So you write the name of the table you are updating, then the keyword set. So you mention the column you want to update its value and its value. So you can update as many columns as you want, separating them by commas. Now, if your updating is going to also be affected by a particular condition, then you continue with where. Okay, so remember, if you're updating something and don't specify the where, it will update all the entries you have. But if you want for a particular condition or a particular row, you have to specify the where condition so that only that particular row which matches that condition will be affected. Okay, so this is a typical example. So if you have this token by this and you want to change the value of our first name to Moses and the value of our last name to be Adete, where at this particular token, then you can write this code. So let's go to the persons table and see if we have this on our database in our table. So okay, so in our table you can see that our first name is God and our last name is Ashon, and the token value is what? Uh, XABSEAD20. Okay, so if I want to update this one, so if I want to update this one, this is a token. So I will just write my query. So we are changing our first name to Moses and our last name to Adete. So we just write update. Then you give the name of the table. So what is the name of the table? So persons. Okay, so then the keyword set. Then the name of our table. First name. And you want to set the value. It's of the type string, so we need to put the value in the single quotation. So we set the first name, we are changing to Moses. So now if you are doing more updates, so you need to separate them by commas. And our next one is our last name. We said it should have the value Adete. Now, if you don't specify the where condition, like I told you, it's going to affect everywhere. To change all the first name to this and all the last name to this. So you need to specify the condition for where the change is supposed to happen. So here, where our token, so at the place where we have this token value, okay. So at the place where we have this token value, we are changing the value. So the first name will be Moses and the last name is going to be Adete. Remember, before it is Godwin and Ashon, but we are changing it so that when we execute the query, we go back and check if the update has been done. So the query says update, then the name of the table, then the keyword set, then you specify the column and its value, then you specify the condition where that row needs to be affected, then you go to go. Okay, so you see it has updated. So let's check. Uh, let's check if the first name has changed to Moses and last name to Adit. Okay, so Moses and Adit. Okay, so that's it. So basically that's about the updating. So update name of the table set, then the column name, its values, column name, its value. Then if there's a condition where you want the update to be done, you specify the condition over here. Now remember, if you don't specify the condition, all the rows of the table will be updated. So for example, if you write this query and you have 2 or more rows, all of them will have the first name this and the last name that. And deleting from table. So to delete also from table, we have delete from then you specify the table name. Okay. Now you have to specify the condition where you want to delete. So the condition for the particular row where you want to delete. Remember, if you don't specify the where condition, it will delete everything. Okay. So you specify the where condition. So if I'm deleting my delete, if you have this delete from persons where token is equal to this. So if our token is this value, it will delete that row. Okay. So the query is delete from, then the table name, then where, then specify the condition where you want to delete. Okay, so I'm going to delete this uh, column. So I'm going to use the query because the token is unique. It doesn't have duplication. So I can write my query delete from persons where token is equal to, and I specify the token. So remember from delete from then the table name, then where. So I want to delete where my token is equal to this. Okay. If I execute at the row where that token value is, it will delete that row. It asks you, do you really want to delete from execute this row while this is, so you just say okay. So one row affected, so it has deleted our entry. Okay, so as you can see, it has deleted our entry. So that's for delete. So delete from name of the table, then where in specify the condition over here. Then we are on our PHP scripts now. So for the PHP script, this is what today. The other ones we are doing, we are just revising some database query concept. But if you've taken a database course, all these things should be easier for you because that's not part of today's lesson. Today's lesson is writing the PHP script. First, we need to connect with our database, and we need to insert an information into the database. We need to fetch an information from the database. We need to update an information, and we need to delete an information from the database. So that's our purpose for this week's lesson. So this is where we are beginning. The other ones is just revising our database queries. Okay, so to connect to a database, you need to create a connection variable. So you have $con is equal to, then you call the MySQL connect function. So you call MySQL connect. Then you specify the host name over here. Then you specify the database name. Okay, the database username here. So you have your database username, then you have your database password over here, then you have the database name over here. So the database name comes last, then you have the database username and database password name. Now if you are using XAMPP has default username. So the default username, you have root, it is called root, the username is root, and the password, no password, so you leave it, you will not put anything here. Then the name of the database that you have created comes over here. Okay, now if your database is on the same machine where you have your PHP script, then here can be localhost. It can be a local host. But if your database is hosted somewhere else, then you have to write the domain name where your database is being hosted over here. Okay, so basically that's it. Now, in other bigger projects, or if you are hosting your application somewhere else, then you have to create the user and assign the user to your PHP database. Okay, but for some, you can use the root default users. So you can have the default users for that one. Okay, let me check some more. Okay, so for the exam, you can also create another privileges to other people. So we can have privileges. So okay, so the privileges, you can add a user account. So you can create an account. This is the one we are using, the root. It doesn't have any password. So we've given it a privilege. So if you want to have another user, you just have add user. So users having access to school DB. So if you add a new user, so you give the user a name. So if my user maybe I say school, okay. If I give it a password, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. So if I give it a password, then it can be any host. Okay, it can be any host or local or however you want it. So if you want to give it a local host, so this is the host name and this is the username, the password. Okay. So you have to retype the password again. So I said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Now if you want to generate password too, you can generate the password over here. Okay. Now you need to give the user the privileges you want to assign to that user. So if I want the user to be able to select an information, so I can click here. If I want the user to insert something, I can click here. If I want the user to update an information, I can click here. If I want the user to delete an information, I can click here. If I want the user to create a table, I can click here. If I want the user to drop a table, I can click here. So based on what I want the user to do, I can click those ones. So based on whatever you want to over here. So
can give the user those privileges. So once you are done, you just can go. Okay, so you added this information and it grants this information. So that's it for the number of users. So now if you go to privileges, you're supposed to see the new user I've created. Okay, so privileges.
Okay, so that's it. So you have school, host name is local host. Then we have privileges it has. This is the database name. Then we have the privileges it has. We have grants. Yeah, grants we didn't take here. So grants, yeah. Okay. Okay, so we go back to our scripts. Okay, so you create a connection variable, then you use this function MySQL connect. It takes the host name. So if it's on the same machine, localhost to be here. Then the user, the database, the user you created will be here. By default, the example also have a user by default root, and that one it doesn't have any password. But if you created a different user account for your database connection, then here will be the username. For example, the one I created, I call it school, so it's going to be here. Then the password, for example, the root doesn't have any password, so that will be here. But for the one I created, I made the password 12345 6 over here. Then you select the name of the database. Remember, you assign a user to a database. So this user details is the database you have assigned to that user. And you specify the database over here. Okay, so that's what I have explained over here. Now the connection, you can check if connection has been made or not by using the if condition. So if the connection variable, if it's connected, you can just echo connected. Else, if it's not connected, you can just write database connection failed. Okay, so we are going to write our script to connect to the database. So you can create your PHP scripts. You can give it a name. You can create a folder, database. Then in the folder, in the HTTP docs, then in the folder you can have index.php where you can type this one. So when you go to localhost slash the name of the folder you've written is database, then you see whatever you type in your index.php. Okay, so it says create a connection variable. So we can just copy here, then we put in the necessary values. So they create a connection data variable. So this connection, our host name is localhost. Okay. Now for now I'll use the roots, then we can have the roots. Okay. Then we can have The root doesn't have any password. The name of our data is school DB. School DB. Okay, then that's it. So now we can check if connection has been successful or not by just having the if. So if con to return true if it has connected. So we can echo connected. Then else it means it didn't connect. Go to connect to database. Okay, that is it. So I'm going to run this script. Let's see what happens. So localhost slash. So here my example is in week 5. So localhost slash week 5. Okay, so it says connected. Okay, so let me check that of the school I created. So school, the username is school, and the password was 1 2 3 4 5 6. Let me check. Okay, so that one is also connected. So this user has the privilege. Okay, so if you enter wrong password, you get an error that it's not connected. Okay, so you see that failed to connect to database. Okay, so normally if it's wrong, it gives you XAMPP also gives you another one, the access denied for this thing, using password. Yes, so if you decide to use password and the password is wrong, or the username or the password is wrong, you get the XAMPP error. But our actual this one also told that the connection failed. So that's it. Okay. So any of them, if you want to use the roots with no password, or if you've created an account for a user, then the username you've given to that user and the password you've given to that user and the name of the database you are connecting to. Remember, the name of the database should be the the one you've assigned the user to. If you with the database you've assigned, if the user details is correct but the database assigned to that user is not the one you specify here, that one to connection will fail. Okay, so that's about the connection. So you create a connection variable. So $con is equal to mysql connect. Then if your host name is on your server, then localhost, then the name of the user, if it's root, then the password of the database user, and the name of your database. Once you are done, you can check if connection is successful or not. So once your connection is successful, you can ignore this part, but you'll be using your connection variable. So we'll be using our connection variable. That's why before you do anything, before you add to the database, before you get value from the database, before you update, you need to create a connection variable because we'll be using that variable to interact with our database. Okay, so that's it for connection. We've done this one. Okay, so we've done that one. Okay, so now to insert, update, or delete from a table, we use MySQL query. Then the connection variable you've created. Then you write your query in the variable SQL. Okay, so here it takes in your query, then the connection variable. So you can create a variable SQL, then you pass in that variable, or you can put the text there direct, wherever you want to do it. But if you are getting information from a user or a form or this, normally we create this variable by joining the values we get from the user to our string. Then we pass in that string over here. Okay, so that one then you create your SQL string. Okay, then together with your connection variable, then you can execute your query to do something. So you just write MySQL li, so li underscore query. Then it takes in your connection variable and your query over here. Okay. Now if you want to check if the query has been successfully executed, and that one too you can use if on it. So all this one from here to here you can just write if. So you put them in an if condition. So if then brackets, then the execution of your query goes here. So if it's successful, you do something else. If it's not successful, maybe you tell the user connect, fail to insert or update or whatever you want to tell the user based on what the user is doing. Okay. So like I said, you need to create this string if you decide not to put the value directly over here. So when you are creating the string, remember text variable, you need to put them in single quotation. Okay. So practical example. So in this practical example, it says create a database by name with 5 or however you want to create it. Okay. So we call student. So having first name, last name, student ID, date of birth, token, and date, then time, which is time stamp, and set to current time span, and the ID is auto increment. Okay. Then insert the first name, last name, date of birth, token, and date of entry into the database. So we already have our student database, so we can directly uh, use it. If you don't have, you can use this query to create your student database. Okay, so remember our date that we will be inserting, the date of birth that we insert is supposed to be in the single quotation because date is also the one that the value needs to be in the single quotation. Then first name to is a text, so the value needs to be in the single quotation. Last name to the value needs to be in the single quotation. Token to the value needs to be in the single quotation. Then for the dates, you can write current date. So you use a CUR then DATE then brackets then bracket close for the insert the date we did the insertion. Okay, so now let's get started. Okay, so since it's connected, we can move the connection, checking of connection. So now we write our query, but first we can create our first name variable. So the first name I want to insert Michael. Okay, and the last name I want to insert Manson. Okay, then what else did they say we should insert? Date of birth, token, student ID. The student ID can have maybe I 000201. Okay, then it says token. So token can have, now you can also generate a token using MD5. So MD5 it generates a token, it can generate a token for you. So if one of your values are unique, which means it doesn't repeat itself, then you can use it to generate your own token. So if I write my MD5 over here, MD5 is a function which generates a particular token. Okay, so I can use the student ID, which is going to be unique because there won't be a situation where two students have the same ID. Okay, then I can as well join it with my time. So you can have your, this is a time function that produces the Unix time, yeah, Unix time of your the current time in the integer form. Okay, so this returns that when it joins with your student ID, then it generates a token for you. So we can generate our token this way. Okay, now we can do our insertion. So we write our SQL. So SQL is equal to insert into student. Okay, you have to specify the column. So first name, last name. So these are the column names. Then student ID. Then what else? Date of birth. Okay, we haven't done the date of birth. Then token. Then date. Okay, then values. Okay, so values. So we are going to put our values here. Okay. Now let me check if the this have a date of. Remember, for date of birth, we start from year, month, and day. So date of birth. Okay, I can write it. The year 2021. The month is March. Date of birth. I can say 1990. The month can be May. The day can be first. So first May 1990. Okay. So let me check if my student table has a column called date of birth. It doesn't have it. Let me add date of birth. Let's hope it doesn't give this error again. Okay, so I'll put the date of birth after student ID. Hmm. Why is this not inserting it? It's not giving me even a reason why it's not giving it. Can't expand this. Didn't give any power. Why is doing that? It wants us to select now first. Okay, so I've inserted the date of birth column. So, so that's it. So now let's do the insertion. So like I said, the value is supposed to be in the single quotation. So I write my single quotation, I close my string, then I join repeat value. So fn, then I start, then I have my single quotation. Okay. So for text, date, voucher, your value is supposed to be between the single quotation. So when this value is joined, there will be single quotation here, there will be single quotation here, then followed by last name to we have single quotation between them. Then the student ID to now the student ID, okay, followed by date of birth. So like I said, date two, we need to put it in a single quotation. So we have our date of birth. Okay. Then we have our after date of birth, we have what? Token. So we have our token. Then our date is current date. So we have CUR, then that's okay. So that's our query. So now we will check if it has been inserted. So we have if MySQL query. The MySQL query takes in the connection variable which we've connected already in our SQL query. Okay. So this is where we have our MySQL query. It executes the query. Now we put it in the if condition. So we have our open bracket, we close it. Okay. Now we can echo, then we can indicate the name of maybe the student which has been added. So we can have echo, we can have maybe .fn .ln. So we can say successfully added. Okay. So s code add. So else we just add code add. So code add table, student table. Okay. So that's it. So like I said, you join your variables to your query string so that you can get a complete query. So insert into students, then you specify the column. So first name, last name, student ID, date of birth, token, then dates, then values. So values, then you specify their values. For single quotation, for text or string, you put them in single quotation. So this will be our single quotation. Then we join with our variable. Okay. Then this will be between a single quotation. We join with the value. This will be in between a single quotation. We join with value. This will be in a single quotation. We join with value. This will be in a single quotation. We join with each values. Then the dates, we want to use a current date. So we use CUR, then dates, then bracket open, bracket close. Okay. So now we execute our listen, let's see. Okay, successfully added. So when we check our student, we browse our student this, if you see Michael, is it Mensa? So you see what we've inserted. Okay, that's it. Michael Mensa. Then that's the student ID. Then that's date of birth. And that was the token that was generated. Then today is 15th. Okay. Then the time it was inserted. Then the ID is auto increment, so it has automatically increased. Okay. So we'll add another person. So we change. Uh, let's use a female name, Mariama Mohammed. Let's say the ID is, let's say, 5, date of birth maybe 1992, let's say February 1st, March 1st, okay, matter. Okay, so that's it. Then we run again. We run again. Okay, so it has also been added and so on. So try to add more. Okay, try to add more. If you have any problem, you just let me know. But you see that when we do the insertion, it's inserting into our database because we are able to connect our query is correct and our MySQL query does the execution of the query. And if we check if it's successful, we will output what If not, we will just tell the person that it has failed. So that's for that. That's the script. That's this example. That's the example for this. That's the example for this one. That's the example for that one. Okay, so if you want to update the date of birth, so it says update the date of birth for one person. Okay, so if you are updating the date of birth for, like, the token for one of them. Okay, so this token, mm, uh, Mariama, let me check that the token for Mariama. So if I check the token for Mariama, okay, so that's the token for Mariama. Okay, so I'm going to write a query, but before that, because this will be executed, let me add another person. Let's say Rita Bote, and the ID, let's say 3, date of birth will be 93 of February. Okay, so this will set a new one. Now this will execute. Now we want another one that will update Mariama. So write the SQL is equal to update students. Okay, set it said we should change date of birth. So set date of birth. And date of birth, like we said, it's supposed to be in a single quotation and it begins with a year. So if I'm saying it is 1995 January 1st, okay. So now update student, set date of birth this. Now if I don't write a where condition, all the date of birth will change to this. So I'm repeating it again. For a particular row, the where condition really matters. Okay, you let me execute this one so that you can see what I'm talking about. Because I didn't specify anywhere, I'm updating a table, I haven't specified anywhere. So all the places where I have date of birth, it's going to have this value because I didn't specify the where condition over there. So let me run this, then we go to the database and see if, no, sorry, I'm raising a query but I haven't executed it. Okay, so after the query, I need to execute it. So this one, let's see, successfully updated. This one successfully updated. Okay. Now since we've already added it, I have to change this one for another person. So we can have then a J, then the index number can be 10, date of birth can be 91 August 20. Okay. So now what I want to emphasize is that if we don't have any where condition to specify where we are updating, it's going to update everything. So I'm going to run this and we check the dates of birth for all the inserted rows and see if they are all this. Okay. So in programming, see is believing. So I want to do it so that you see the effect. Then you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to run this. Okay, so successfully updated. So now let's browse and see. Okay, so as you can see, C is what related. So all the date of birth 1995, 1st of January 1995, all of them, because I didn't specify the wear condition. So if you are updating, be very, very careful. The wear condition is very, very important. If you leave it, it's going to change everything of your table. So if you don't have a backup, then you'll be in trouble, because everything of that column, everything will be updated. So you don't have the whole information before the update if you don't have a backup. So always remember, when you are updating something, the where condition is very, very important. Okay. For example, I want to update this one. So I know a token, so I have to write where token is equal to this value I'm copying. So here I can say update student set date of birth is equal to maybe 1990 December 1st. Okay, so where token is equal to, token is a text, so it's supposed to be in single quotation. Okay, now I can delete the insertion because we no longer need insertion. We have inserted enough. Okay. Okay, so we are updating students. We are setting the date of birth to 1990 December 1st. Okay, now it's for the person which has this token. So the student which has this token. So that's what it means. So only that particular row with the token this will be inserted. Okay, so I run it and we check the database. Okay, so successfully updated. So let's browse this. Okay, so as you can see, December 1st, 1990 for the where we have our token to be this. So that's for the updating. Okay, now we are on deleting. So if I want to delete, okay. So if I want to delete that row, so let me just change it. So delete from, remember delete is delete from. So delete from. Okay. So that one we don't have any set. Then where condition. So delete from. Then the name of the table. You have your where condition. Okay. So we are deleting the row which has this token. Okay. If I run it, it's going to delete row which has this token. This is the token, so it's going to delete that one from the database, from the table. Okay. Okay. Now we browse. See that one will disappear. This particular one. Okay. So let's write a delete where delete from students. No where condition. Let's see if we get an error or not. Or what will happen. So in a situation where we don't have anywhere in our delete, what happens? Okay, so it says executed, so maybe it may delete everything. Okay, so as you can see, because we didn't specify anywhere, it has deleted all the rows. So where is very, very important. And that if you have lots of entries and you write a wrong query without specifying where you want to do the update, everything will change. See, if you don't have a backup of your data, you'll be in a lot of trouble. Okay, so the where condition is very, very important. The where condition is very, very important. Okay, so that is it. So we continue with the delete with that one. Fetch and display information from database. Now we need to do few insertion because we deleted the ones we've had. Okay, so let's do few insertion, then we start to fetch them. fetch. So we are going to insert more, about 3 of them. Okay. So we can have the second person can be copy what? Date of birth 1990. Then this one. Okay, so that's it. So first we insert this one because we deleted some information. So let's insert. Okay, so insert entries. Now we are going to fetch all those informations and display them. So that's our next task. So we've done insertion, we've done updating. Now we need to fetch the information from the database. Okay, so this is how we do it. So to fetch information from the database, you need to store the result. So here, this same query, you need to store the results in a variable. So in the variable, we can call it query. So we'll store the results over here. So we write $query is equal to the execution of our SQL syntax. So the execution of this one, we store the result over here. So when we execute it, it returns some result which we store them over here. Now this result, before we can go through it, we need to get it in the form of an array. So we will call this MySQL query MySQL fetch array. So MySQL fetch array with the query of the result we have over here, we'll pass it over there. So this will have a row, each row will have the row of the result. So we'll look through it. So if you've taken the previous lectures or taken some programming lesson, wow, we have a number of loops. We have the while loop here. So the while loop will look through each of the rows of the results that appear. Then we can look through each of them. Then we can get a value. Okay. So now we write the syntax. Now we want to select everything. So our syntax is going to be select star from student. Okay. Then we'll execute this line. Then we'll store the result in our query. Okay. So in our query, we'll use this syntax while row is equal to MySQL fetch array query. We pass our query, which is our result inside. Then in between our curly bracket, we'll fetch the value of the row, which is over here. So the row as we can. So when you are looping through the array, you get the row, the values by their columns. So for the first name, for example, the column name is first name at the database side. the last name, the column name is last name. So I can get its value in each of the row. So each of the row, I get the value by their column name. So I store my first name here. I store my first name here. I store my last name here. So if you want to store it later, fine. But if you want to just display it, you can use it directly. Okay, so this will have the value of the first name for that row. So if your result return 3 rows, each of the iteration, each of the looping, and so at each row 1 will have its value, row 2 will have its value, row 3 will have its value, and so on. Okay, so now this will fetch the value. Now to display the results, you can also put it in a tabular form or whatever you are doing. So in this example, you are going to put it in a table. When we fetch the result, we put the result in a table form. Okay, so let's get started. So now we said our query is going to select everything from students. So we have our query select star from students. Okay, now we need to store the result. So query MySQL query, you pass in our connection variable and our SQL there. Okay, so this one is a result. It returns the result for the rows, number of rows we have, but it's not in an array, so we have to get it in an array and look through it. Okay, so now before we look through, we can write our table. We can write our table. So we can have table, we give it a border of 1. Okay, so in this table we can have our tr, our td, we can have our th, the headings. Okay, so our th, we can have our first name. Okay, then we can have our last name, student id, then date of birth. Okay, so this one is last name or surname, then student id, then date of birth. Okay, so now the rows will be the one we'll be looking through them. Okay, so the rows will be the result of our looping. So we can start to do the looping over here. So we have while our row, so each of our row is row. Go to MySQL and fetch array, then we pass in our query. Okay, so each of the rows will be in this row variable. Okay, so now we can get the values by the column names in the row. So here we have our tr. Okay, so we have in our tds, our first td will have our first name. So echo row first name. Okay, then our second td or column will have our last name. So that value is last name. The column name is last name. And then our third one is student id. Our student id. And our fourth one is date of birth. Our date of birth. Okay, so that's it. So now I will run the code. So like I've explained earlier on, so MySQL fetch array, if the results that we've stored over there, we pass it. So it will be an array for each of the rows. So this the row will have this, will be stored over here. So we get the row values by their columns names in the database. So in the database we have our column first name, Okay, so we display it, last name we display it, then student ID we display it for each of the tier of the table rows. Okay, so let's run it and let's see. Okay, so as you can see, it has displayed with what we have on the database. Okay, now if you've done some HTML this in the border, one gives it a border around it. Okay, so we continue. Now you can as well, if you are writing the project, normally we don't do the display directly in the database function side. So we normally pass the data in an array to the front end side. So the front end side will have the array, only the array, then we display the result on the interface. But the database side, when we have our functions, we will just store them in an array, then we pass it to the front end side. So to do that, all your row value, you need to store them in an array. So in this example, we have a function called student. So function, we call it student. So this function will store our row values in an array. Then we will return that array whenever we call this function. So in the front end side, then we will look through that array, then we display the result. Okay, so in this example, I can have a function student. Okay, so this function. Okay, so this we have in our function. So in the function, we connect to our database. So we have a connection variable, connect to our database. We select everything from students. We store our results in the query. Then this query, we are storing each of them in a row. So we create an array for students. So students is equal to array. Okay. So on array calls, we learned array push. So we have array push, which we are going to put all our row arrays inside. So in the array push, all our rows, so each of our row we put it in the student array. So each of our row we put it inside. Then each of our in the looping. So the first we put, the second loop we put, third equation, fourth, and so on. Then we put everything in this student array. So now we can return our student. Okay. Now later on we'll see how we would also disconnect ourselves from the database. This one connected. Now before we return the value, we also need to disconnect ourselves from the database, but that one we'll see it later. Okay, so this function stores each of the row results in an array, then it returns that array. So now if we want to use this one, we can call this function. So we can have students is equal to student function. So in the student function, this student function returns an array of students. So this will have an array. Then we can look through. Now, but we can also check. We can check if the array contains something. So if you've taken the array calls, we check with if count. If count students. So if count, if it's more than it's one and above, it means it has something. So if it's more than 0, we display it in the result. Else means that it's nothing in our database. It returns no result. So we can write to the user no student on record. Okay, so we can tell the user no student on record. Okay, But if it's more than 0, it means 1 or more. So we can display our result. So we display it in a table form. So we have table, then border is equal to 1, and end of the table. Then we have our th. Our first one is our first name. Okay. Then we have our last name, student ID, and date of birth. Last name, student ID, and date of birth. Okay. Now we will try to look through our array. So we will go through each of our array. So if you've taken the array course, we can use a for each to go through each of our array rows. So we can have for each student as student. Okay, so this will be each of the content of our array. This will be each of the content of our array. And we can display its results. So we have, then we can have our row, then the first column is student, the column name. So that in the array 2, it has the same column name as you have on your database. So first name is first name. End of this video. So you can copy for the other ones too. This is last name, student ID, and date of birth. You have last name, student ID, and date of birth. And date of birth. Okay. So let's run this. Okay, so you can see the same result. Just that this one we fetch everything and store them in an array. Okay, then you call that function which returns the arrays of the data we fetch from the database. Now we check if there is a data in it using the count. We did the count in the array. So count, then if there is an array contains something, it will be 1 or more. So if it's greater than 0, there is something. So we display its content. Then if there is nothing there, if it's 0, it means there is nothing there. So we tell the user no student on record. Now to look through each of the array, we saw it in our array course, in our array lesson, that we can use for each, then the array name here, then you give a unique name for each of the rows or each of the index of your array. So that's what we've done. Then you can access the values of your columns by their names. So on the each of the content, on this content, we fetch them by their columns names, so we can get their value. We can display them. So in our future project, this will be on our database function. So we have our database function. Then our front end, where we display the user interface, we will call the function from the database to fetch us the data. Then we will look through that data and display the result on the screen. So that's how we are going to do. So we have a complete script for our database where we will fetch the data, then we return it in the form of an array. So the interface side, the front end, fetch that data, then we can look through and display the result. Okay, so this we've done already. Now we are on the close. So to close the connection, we call MySQL close. Then you close the connection value. So in this case, if you want to be connected. So now if you want to close, before you return a value, you close your database. So you just have MySQL close, okay, and then you pass in your connection variable to close it. So if you run it, it's going to be the same. This. So now it has just closed from the connection. To close the connection, that it did. Okay, so we continue. Now, if you do insertion into a database, so for example, when we're inserting the first name and the rest, if you want to get the ID of the last inserted row, then you use this syntax MySQL insert ID. This is handy if you are creating an account, sign up. So in the sign up, if you are using the ID of the one who has logged in to create a session, then you need to know what is the ID of that person who just signed up. So you call this MySQL function to get the ID of the one you just added to the database. Then you can use that value to set your session variable. So use that session variable to be fetching that information for that particular user. Okay, so let's see an example. So I'm going to undo to where we did some insertion. Then I will call that function. Then I will display the value of the ID so that we can see. So we had one insertion. Okay, so we have one insertion here. So I'll just change the name to Jim Boy. Okay, so let's see. 3 year, 4 year, 1 year, 505. Okay. Okay. So now we are going to call successful. So let's say I'll put the ID here. So ID, then I join with the ID which you will get so that we know the inserted ID. So I'm going to copy where it says we can use to get the last inserted ID. Okay. So I put it over here. Okay. So this will return the new insertion, the ID of that value. Okay, so it will return it. So based on the ID we get, then it will show the ID value over here. Okay. So now I run it. So it says the last inserted ID is 9. So let's check if that is true. So who did we insert? Eugene Boy. So let's check the ID of Eugene Boy to see if it is 9. Okay, so Eugene Boy, what is your ID? It's 9. So as you can see, it's 9. So later on, when if you are doing PHP application and you have to use session to use the ID to create a session, then since you are able to fetch the last inserted ID because it's in auto increment, since you are able to get the last inserted ID, you can use it to set the session for the user so that you know that this user, this is its ID. So any interaction with your system, then you know who is interacting with your system. So basically that's the MySQL insert ID. So this returns the last inserted ID of your entry. Okay. So in our in our final project, like I've explained earlier on, we will have a class for our database function. So that class will write only database functions inside. Then we also have another function for a non-database related functions. So we have a class for non-database related function and a class for database function, so that if you are going to uh, modify something and you know that it is database related, then you know where to go in your class and do the modification. Okay. So in our class, all the data will be fetching from the database. We are going to put them in an array. Then when the front end calls that function, it returns that in an array. So at the front end, then we can display that data from by looping through your array, which we got from our database class. So our database class is going to look something like this. We have class DB, then the database class will have this variable. For the non-database related function, we will also create an object for it and pass in that object as the constructor for our database class. Now, why do we need the non-related database functions? Because in the database side, we may need to call a function which is not database related. For example, if you are encrypting our password, encryption of password is not database related function. So we'll write that function in our non-database related function. So we will need to call it to encrypt the password that our user will enter, so that we will match it with the one we have on our database. Okay. So there are some functions which are not database related, but we will need them in our database function. So we need this non-database related function objects so that we can be able to access their methods in that particular function. So our database class will look something like this. So I'm just introduce it to you now so that you get familiarized with it, so that when we start our final project, things will be easy for you. Then we have our connection. So you set your database host name here, then you set your database username, then you set your database password here. If you've created a user for it, then the username will be here and the password will be here and the database name will be here. Then this connection will connect to our database and it will return the connection variable. So anytime we want to execute something on the database, we need to create the connection variable by calling this method dbConnect. Then we pass in the connection variable, then we can use it. Now if you want to close our connection to, then we can call dbClose and pass in the connection variable to close it. Okay, so that's basically that for this week. Then you have an assignment to create a database for books. So based on the things that you will need for the columns. So a book should have a title, a book should have a publisher, a book should have an author, a book should have maybe the ID of that book. Then the book may have an abstract and so on. So you just create a table for the book, then you set information into the book table, then you select a particular book. So if you are using the author name or if you are using the reference or the ID of the book or whatever you want to use, you should be able to update a particular book based on your query. Okay, so that is the assignment. So you do it. If you have any challenge, you contact me. Okay, so what have we learned today? We've learned a lot. We were able to create a database. We were able to insert and create a table. Like I said, tables are in database. So you create database first, then you create tables in the database, then you set information into your table. Okay. Now, when for a varchar text or data types of your table, you need to put your value in the single quotation when you are creating the insert lesson. Or if you are using a where condition to, you have your text, your varchar, and your this should be in the same quotation even when you are doing your where condition. Okay. Now, if you want to select everything, you use a star to mean everything. Now, if you want to select for a particular column, you use a column names and so on. Okay. So I believe it is clear. So you try other examples. So you create a table, you create a database, create table, uh, add information to the data table, select information from the table using the PHP scripts, and delete an information from the table using the PHP scripts, and so on. Okay. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.